Do you believe that just one bag of cement could make an entire nation fall silent? How was Captain Ibrahim Traore able to touch the hearts of all citizens of a country? Just one bag of cement. Not because it's rare, not because it's expensive, but because of the way it was given. This story begins in a small Burkina Faso village where the red earth stretches to the horizon and the sound of birds mixes with the rhythmic pounding of grain each morning. There, a 12-year-old boy lived with nothing more than a pair of small hands, an old bicycle, and a heart that loved his country more than anything. He had just passed the CEP 2020 exam, a milestone that for many children is a promise of a brighter future. His friends celebrated with sweets and new clothes, but in his eyes the joy of that day was not just for himself. He thought about the roads still unpaved, the schools still missing desks, and the walls half built without plaster. He thought about his country and asked himself, if no one starts, then who will? Then one day he heard about the Faso EV initiative. The dream of Captain Ibrahim Traore for the people to build their homeland with their own hands. Without waiting for anyone's orders, without expecting any reward, he decided he would take part. But how could he, when all he had were a few coins in his pocket? From that day forward, every coin his parents gave him, he quietly saved. Every candy he refused, every snack he went without, was another step closer to his goal. Day after day until he finally had enough to buy a single bag of cement. And on that morning, with the bag tied to the back of his old squeaky bicycle, he began a journey that, though he didn't yet know, it would move the hearts of millions. The boy's home was as humble as his dreams were grand. A small tin-roof house with walls that seemed to breathe with the wind and a floor of hard-packed earth that had been swept so many times it gleamed in the afternoon sun. His parents were farmers, people of the soil whose hands were rough from years of coaxing life from dry ground. They had no savings, no spare luxuries. Every cent they earned was stretched thin to feed the family, pay for school fees, and keep the house standing. In that home, love was abundant, but money was scarce. And yet the boy never saw his family as poor. To him, they were rich, rich in integrity, rich in hard work, rich in pride for their country. From a young age, he had learned to listen. While the adults spoke under the shade of mango trees or during long evenings when the lantern burned low, he heard them discuss the challenges facing the nation roads, left unbuilt, bridges washed away by rain, schools where children sat on the floor because there weren't enough desks. These weren't just stories to him. They were images that burned into his mind, problems that begged for solutions. When the Faso EV initiative was announced, something in him ignited. It wasn't just a project to build things. It was a movement to take ownership of the country's future. It was the president himself telling the people, we will no longer wait for others to build our future. We will do it with our own hands. For most children his age, those words would have been inspiring and then forgotten. But for him, they took root. They became a mission. The boy didn't tell anyone at first. Not his friends, not even his parents. He didn't want them to stop him, to say, you're too young, or it's not your responsibility. He knew what he wanted to do, and he knew it had to come from him freely without anyone asking. And so began his quiet quest. Every coin, every tiny bit of change went into a small tin box hidden beneath his bed. When his friends bought candy, he said no. When they played games that cost a little money, he stayed home pretending to be busy. Weeks turned into months. The coins piled up slowly, their clinking sound becoming a secret melody of determination. He didn't think about how long it would take. He only thought about the moment he would finally stand before the Faso EV team with his small but meaningful contribution in hand. The day came sooner than he expected. One afternoon, after counting and recounting the coins, he realized he had enough to buy one bag of cement. It might have seemed small to others, but to him it was monumental. The next morning, he strapped that bag to his battered bicycle. The tires sagged under the weight, the chain groaned, but he didn't care. He set off along the dusty road, the sun climbing higher, his shadow stretching long before him. People along the way watched curiously. Some smiled, some shook their heads in disbelief. Where is that boy going with a bag of cement, they must have wondered. But none of them knew the depth of his journey, that he was not just delivering construction material, he was delivering hope. The road was long, longer than the boy remembered. Every turn seemed to stretch further into the horizon, every hill steeper than before. The sun blazed overhead, turning the red earth into a mirror of heat. His thin shirt clung to his back, soaked with sweat. Each push of the pedal was a small battle. The weight of the cement pressed down on the bicycle, grinding the tires into the dirt. The chain squealed with every turn, as if protesting, but the boy didn't stop. He thought of the unfinished walls in the school down the road. He thought of the children who sat on the ground because there weren't enough desks. He thought of his parents bent over in the fields, believing that tomorrow could be better if they worked hard enough. And he thought of Captain Ibrahim Traore's words echoing in his mind like a drum beat. The future of our nation is in our own hands. Every time his legs screamed for rest, he pictured the moment he would arrive, the moment he would hand over his bag of cement. That vision was a rope pulling him forward. The road grew rougher. Sharp stones rattled under the tires and deep ruts jolted the frame of his bicycle. At one point, the bag shifted dangerously, threatening to topple. He stopped, straightened it, and tightened the rope. Then he pushed on. He passed through villages where old men sat under trees and women balanced baskets on their heads. People paused to watch the small figure laboring under the blazing sun. Some called out to him, but he only smiled and waved, too focused to explain. Hours passed. The sun began to sink, casting long shadows across the land. His legs ached, his throat burned, but his heart beat faster with each mile. He knew he was close. And then there it was, the gathering point for the Faso Embo initiative. Stacks of bricks, piles of sand, and rows of cement bags towered like silent sentinels. Workers moved about, mixing mortar, laying foundations. The air was filled with the sound of shovels striking earth and hammers pounding nails, the music of a nation rebuilding itself. The boy rolled his bicycle forward, each step heavier than the last. He could feel the stares of the workers now. A few paused their work to watch him. One man, covered in dust, approached with a curious smile. "Where are you coming from, young one?" the man asked. The boy looked up, sweat dripping from his forehead, and answered quietly, "I brought this for Burkina Faso." He untied the rope and with trembling arms helped lower the bag of cement to the ground. The man's smile faded into something deeper: respect. Word spread quickly among the workers. Soon a small crowd had gathered. Some patted the boy on the back. Others simply looked at him in silence. And then one of the elders spoke. "You came all this way for this?" The boy nodded. "I don't have much," he said, "but I want my country to move forward." The elder's eyes glistened. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You have given more than you know," he said. "Not just a bag of cement, but an example." And in that moment, the boy's journey was complete. The bag of cement lay there among hundreds of others, indistinguishable, ordinary. Yet everyone knew it was different, because it carried not just powder and stone, but the weight of a young heart's hope. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the boy rode home with an empty bicycle, but a soul that felt full beyond measure. The road no longer seemed so long. The hills no longer felt so steep. He had left something behind that day, not just material for building walls, but a spark. A spark that might one day ignite in others the courage to give, to act, to believe. And perhaps somewhere in the quiet of that evening, Captain Ibrahim Traore himself would hear of the boy and smile, knowing that the future of Burkina Faso was already in good hands. The picture was simple: a boy, a bicycle, a bag of cement. Yet in its simplicity, it carried the weight of an entire nation's dream. The boy stood there in the golden light of late afternoon, his thin frame casting a long shadow over the dusty ground. His shirt clung to him, stained with sweat and dust. His small hands that should have been holding books or playing games bore the marks of a long, relentless ride. Behind him, the bicycle leaned slightly to one side. Its frame scratched, its tires worn thin. The rope that had held the cement bag in place was frayed, its fibers still taut from the strain. The bag itself lay at the boy's feet, its grey surface smudged with red dust, now indistinguishable from the earth it would one day help to build upon. Around him, the workers of Faso Embo paused. Hammers fell silent, shovels rested. For a moment, the rhythm of construction slowed as if the entire site had turned to bear witness. Their eyes spoke what their mouths did not. This is what we are building for. The wind carried the faint scent of cement mixing with the earthy smell of soil and sweat. The sounds of distant children's laughter floated on the breeze, a reminder of why walls are raised and schools are built. In that frozen moment, the boy was no longer just a boy. He was a builder, a patriot, a symbol. His presence said what no speech could, that the strength of Burkina Faso lay not in wealth or in politics, but in the hands of its people, even the smallest hands. Photographers couldn't have staged it better. It was the kind of image that would outlive the moment passed from phone to phone screen to screen, heart to heart. An image that would say to anyone who saw it, "Here is what love of country looks like." And though the bag of cement would soon be broken open, its contents mixed into mortar and spread into walls, the memory of that image of the boy, the bicycle and the weight he carried would remain unshakable. They asked him, "Why did you do this? Why carry such a heavy load so far, all by yourself?" The boy didn't fumble for words. He didn't prepare a speech. He didn't speak like someone who wanted praise or recognition. Instead, he looked at them with eyes that had seen enough of life to know what truly matters, and said softly but firmly, "I don't have much, but I want my country to move forward." Just 12 words. 12 words that landed heavier than the bag of cement itself. The workers stood still. Some smiled faintly, others lowered their heads. And in that silence, his voice seemed to echo not just in the courtyard of the construction site, but in the minds of everyone who heard it. Because these were not the words of a politician, not the slogan of a campaign. They were the truth of a child's heart, spoken without agenda, without calculation. One of the elders on site later said, "That boy gave us more than cement. He gave us a reason to work harder tomorrow." And indeed, his sentence became more than just a reply to a question. It became a line people would repeat to one another. In the villages, in the cities, in the crowded markets. "I don't have much, but I want my country to move forward," began to carry the weight of a motto. In a world where people often wait for leaders to act, here was a child reminding everyone that the smallest citizen could make the largest difference. His words were like a spark, and sparks have a way of spreading. That day, in his own quiet way, he had given Burkina Faso more than a bag of cement. He had given it a vision, one that started with 12 words and could build an entire future. What is patriotism? For some, it's waving a flag at a national holiday. For others, it's singing the anthem at the start of a game. But for this 12-year-old boy, patriotism was simpler and far heavier. It was saving the little he had, resisting the small pleasures every child loves, and riding for hours under the burning sun, just to give something back to his country. His act was not measured in money. It was measured in sacrifice. When we look at nations that rise from hardship, it's easy to focus on the leaders, the generals, the presidents, the ministers. But history is built not only by those in power, but by ordinary people who decide that waiting is not an option. This boy had no authority, no platform, no wealth, yet he acted. And that is the deeper truth here. You don't have to be rich to give. You don't have to be powerful to make an impact. You just have to care enough to do something. The bag of cement he brought will be mixed with water and sand. It will be spread onto bricks, strengthening the walls of a building. That building may be a school, a clinic, or a community hall. Hundreds of people may pass through it never knowing about the boy who helped it stand. But that's the beauty of true service. It doesn't need credit. It just needs action. And while the cement will one day harden into walls, the boy's gesture has already built something far more enduring: belief. Belief that change can start with anyone, anywhere. Belief that the smallest contribution given with sincerity can ripple outward in ways we cannot predict. Perhaps years from now, someone will walk into that building, see the sturdy walls, and feel proud of their country without even knowing why. And somewhere in another village, another child will decide, if he could do it, so can I. This is how a nation moves forward, not in leaps made by a few, but in countless small steps taken by many. And that, more than anything, is the lesson this young boy has left us. So now you've heard the story. A boy. A bicycle. A bag of cement. It wasn't a grand speech that moved his nation. It was an action. A choice. A sacrifice that said, I will do my part no matter how small. If this 12-year-old can look at his country and say, I don't have much, but I want my country to move forward, then what about us? What can we give? What can we build? What excuse do we have to stay silent? Here's the truth: you don't have to wait for the right time. You don't need a fortune. You don't even need permission. What you need is the will to start. Maybe you can't carry a bag of cement on a bicycle, but you can carry a message. Share this story. Tell it to your friends, your family, your community. Let this boy's action spread so others feel the same spark he felt. And if this story has touched your heart, if it has made you proud, if it has reminded you that greatness begins with giving, then I invite you to act right now. Leave a comment below telling us what your first step will be to help build a better future. Share this video so others can see what true patriotism looks like. And for those who want to go one step further, hit the super thanks button right now. Not just as a gesture to this channel, but as a way of saying, I stand with this spirit. I will help keep this message alive. Every click, every contribution fuels our mission to tell stories like this, stories that inspire action, unity, and pride across Africa and the world. Because in the end, a nation doesn't rise because of one leader alone. It rises when ordinary people like you and me decide that now is the time to give. So what will you give?